Formula Access. Hey, today we got a real special guest. Pardon my enthusiasm, but I come from a family of marketers, logos, brands, strategy, you name it, our companies do it. Today we have the head of brand strategy for Aston Martin F1. She goes by the name of Kate Dalton. She is a treat. She is wickedly smart, you guys. This was the right hire when Lawrence entered the space. If any of you guys have followed my writing on Quora, you will know that the business of Formula One and how it impacts decision, news, and us as fans, it's very important for me to communicate that. And I've been very, very vocal since Aston Martin announced their entry into Formula One. I've also been very vocal about their driver selection and their driver strategy as the team has evolved and grown over time. One thing that you'll pick up on, a lot of the stuff that I said was right. And I don't say that to brag. It relaxes me because I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time. I'm just doing what I would do if I was the CEO of Aston Martin. And so to hear that the head of brand strategy, Lawrence himself, and all of these people are doing things that I've also communicated was it was a sigh of relief, guys. So, hey, man, I swear I'm not bragging or I told you so, but I'm really thankful that that this turned out to be the case. She's a treat, you guys. She's awesome. This is the kind of person that has also connected me to other people around the paddock that you will be really interested to hear about. One or two of which I will be doing recordings with next week. So, guys, sit down, relax, grab a cup of coffee, enjoy. Kate's awesome. Enjoy. Formula Access. Welcome. I told you I'd be bringing the people of motorsports to your doorstep. Yet again, we have another one. Kate Dalton joins us from Aston Martin F1. We've been trying to connect for quite some time now, and we finally managed to put our schedules together. Kate, welcome, and thank you for coming on the show.
Ryan, thanks so much. It's great to be here.
I am taken back. I think brand strategy is not generally the fan topic. I personally write about this in blogs quite a bit because I think for a brand like Aston Martin, I actually have not invited any other brand personality from the sport into it because I think the racing heritage of Aston Martin in and of itself is unique. And I really wanted to kind of get into that because prior to the name change from Racing Point to Aston Martin, I had written quite a bit about just, driver selection, about, brand strategy, kind of what the vision would look like with a brand like Aston Martin behind it. Yeah. And the execution has been quite spot on. So it's been really neat to watch that play out. I'm sure you've had a huge hand in that. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I think, this is a topic that is actually quite new to F1 in a way. I think there's only so many teams with a function like brand strategy in it because, by kind of its nature, Formula One buys into their, rights holders, they buy into IP and they kind of then have this brand on the car and that's their brand and the brand is the brand kind of thing. But actually, sport is a personality game. And in order to have cut through, in order to land well with fans and to keep them engaged and to keep them happy, you really got to craft your own story and engineer, and that requires strategic thinking. I get often asked, why do Formula One teams need a brand strategy? And that's why. It's because your story on track becomes your only story if you don't add anything else to it and if you don't engineer it yourself. So it is super important to bring Aston Martin, what is kind of Lagonda, like the road car business that everyone knows, into the world of F1. It can't just stand still and stay as it is. It needs to operate within the market that it's in and serve the audiences that it serves in F1, which is all about F1 fans and the sponsors we have as well.
So to inform fans here,
Mm,
What exactly does the head of brand strategy do? Is it social media? Is it marketing? Is it logos? Is it
yeah.
livery? What?
Essentially, my main concern is our brand identity. So how we look and how people experience us, essentially, to put it as simply as I can. So that's down to the branding and the creative at every touch point. So whatever happens on social media and our digital channels in terms of where our logo is, where it's positioned against the kind of marketing campaigns that we put out in the world, all of their look and feel, how they show up, that kind of sits under my remit. And then how people experience us is really all about defining what the brand messaging is, what our tone of voice is, and how we kind of act and behave. So that the pillars of the brand that position us in a certain way in the minds of our fans and beyond. So it seems, I think, if you're not familiar with the area, it seems a little bit up in the clouds, but it's meant to be up there, because it's kind of a jump off point or a starting point with any company who's doing a brand exercise. They think about, what is our positioning? So what in the minds of people do we want them to think about this brand? What's the first thing that comes to their mind? What is typically X? So what is typically Aston Martin F1? And it's that single message that all of my focus is pretty much drawn to. But I work within our marketing department, so I report to our CMO, and I would have a pretty heavy hand, I guess, in our creative campaign execution across all channels as well. And I work really directly with both our brand team, like our designers, with our marketing activation team, with the partnerships team, so our sponsorship team as well, in terms of defining with sponsors what their brand message is, and how we land that, and our content creation and production teams. So yeah, it's kind of the full suite that I almost work collaboratively with, but where my role generally sits is, as I say, a little bit up in the clouds, to define really what we want to be, who we are, how we show up in the world.
It makes perfect sense to me. Everything you just said makes perfect sense. I totally get it. What? How is a brand strategy for a works team like Aston Martin different from, say, Racing Point or Force India previously?
I think the team as well, I have to be, transparent about this. The team prior to Aston Martin was, was quite scrappy, I guess, in nature. It was always known as like the underdog. And that's one thing I kind of love about the team, because it's still part of our storyline. We've taken on and inherited, there's a lot of people who work at Aston Martin now who worked at Force India and are a huge part of the team's history. So it's really important that we retain that storyline of the underdog and the kind of determined team in F1 that was kind of punching above its weight, because it didn't always have the finance and it had some controversy as well. I guess to your question is, why we need a brand strategy here and why we've got, I guess more of an emphasis put on managing our brand, is that Aston Martin is already this global iconic brand in the world. And if it has an F1 team, that F1 team has to support the master brand and has to support the growth of it and deliver all the right messages. So if Aston Martin had come in and simply painted over Racing Point and not put any thought behind it and not responded to the market it was now in and thought about how Aston Martin Lagonda, as a 109-year-old business and brand, known for being very British, James Bond's car, how it actually shows up in F1 and responds to the current market that is F1, which is competitive in terms of sponsorships and also has an incredibly growing fan base. It wouldn't have made sense unless there was more strategic thinking. So I think for us, what we've developed as Aston Martin is a much kind of broader brand platform to market sponsors. And we don't even see them as sponsors. We actually rarely use that word. I shouldn't say it. We say partnerships, because all of our sponsors are partners, and they're nearly all completely integrated into the business in some way, which has been really fantastic to work in that way. And with Aston Martin, we have the kind of breadth and depth to market those partners and market our own brand in a way perhaps that the other team iterations didn't, because they were very solely focused F1 teams. Aston Martin as a brand can play in other verticals. It's a luxury business, and so it's luxury. That also means it can move into more creative industries and fashion, music, things like that. It's got license in other areas. So yeah, so that's why we've had to develop a strategy behind it, why we need to keep evolving it, and we need the right people behind it to keep pushing the right stuff. So yeah.
So you guys, however your hand was involved in this, but
Mm.
a local dealer, a local Aston Martin dealer here had Lance's, I guess, 2020 car
Yeah.
rebranded as their 2022 livery, and had it at a dealership here. And, I ran over there and, I just grabbed some content and some video around it. They were really, really nice and just kind of inquisitive and curious about what I did. But to me as a fan, it's one thing to see it here. It's another
Mhm.
thing to like look at the car and all the aerodynamic elements on it and have just kind of a profound respect for, what a powerful and delicate machine that is. But I
Yeah.
think, for a fan, I was like a kid on Christmas Day. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a Formula One car here. And you get to go and you get to see, the tires. Obviously, you can't see this through a video here, but they're huge,
Yeah.
and the you couldn't sit in the cockpit, but you can get close enough to understand, you're 2 feet off the ground. The top of your head is 2 feet from the ground and you're driving 200 miles an hour with little teeny tiny aerodynamic elements that are, 5 millimeters from the tire. It's fascinating to me from a marketing standpoint or like fan engagement. Putting that car at that dealership was monumental. I wish it would have been marketed more heavily in the area, but um, you know, what you guys do is really powerful. Another reason why I wanted to have you come on the show was really I feel like this new iteration of Formula One, which is, intense growth, intense social media engagement. Your brand is not just an independent, wily kind of finding sponsors, but finding, vertically integrated partners,
Yeah.
thinking about brand management. Who are our drivers? Do those drivers fit our brand? Do they fit that legacy? And I think that has held true since Lawrence took this over, and really kind of, I don't know, what you say and what you do are two different things. And I feel like Lawrence has really executed that really well. And, having people like you, what are we, like 5 minutes into this? Coming from a marketing and kind of a business background, you know your stuff. Your words are important. Your philosophies are spot on. So
Thank you.
kudos to him for that hire.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of unpack there. I think firstly, I would say on Lawrence, he's put a lot of investment into this project. It's a real passion project for him, and I think you said this in some way, but you are what you repeatedly do, and Lawrence has repeatedly made good business decisions and puts 100% into his projects, and is also able to strategically understand when to exit something, and this for him, I think, given as well that Lance is in the car, which naturally he's a father, that's important to him. But he's always loved racing. He loves Formula One. He loves cars. He loves brand as well. He's a real brand person. And for him, and there's a line he said, I can't remember what podcast it was in, about he loved the strength and the powerhouse that Aston Martin was as a brand, and that how British people felt they owned it. And that was just something so unique to Aston Martin. And I know it is to, you can name that with other US brands and things like that. But yeah, and he's got a lot of passion and care for this project. And that makes all of us, I think, feel very motivated. And I mean, from my perspective, and my boss, Rob Bloom, he's our CMO here. He spent, I think, 8 years at McLaren. He purposely hired a lot of people from outside of sport. I say from outside, just they hadn't had working experience in Formula One or sport. I'm one of those people. My background is in kind of luxury marketing, mainly in fashion, which I understood the transfer when I saw it was Aston Martin at the top of the job spec. I was like, yeah, I get it. Although when I did get the job spec, I don't think it said F1 till I interviewed. I didn't know it was F1. So that was different. But he intentionally did that not only to bring a more diversity of thought within the company, particularly within the brand space, but also because there is a recognition that, you know, F1, certainly from a fan perspective over the last few years, and even internally, people who work in it, it feels like quite an elite sport. You know, it's the pinnacle of motorsport. It's extremely expensive. You know, it's expensive to own a team. It's expensive to drive a car. You know, everything it's got that, which is kind of, you know, a great part of the allure of it, right? Like, we don't kind of lose that. But at the same time, sport must be accessible. And in order to kind of break down a few of those inaccessible barriers, let's say, it's really important to have some fresh thinking who come from other industries. And that was part of, you know, I think Lawrence's decision as well, to recruit people like Rob who had that kind of mindset and could start implementing it. And I think just on your, you know, where you started with about going to the show car, it's amazing to hear, because, you know, our ethos here very much is fan first at every approach. So everything we go into, we're thinking as much as we can in the shoes of a fan. And for us, I think, and certainly for all F1 teams, you can see how they've embraced it with the whole Netflix Drive Survive effect and all these new fans coming in. People just want more. They want more access, and they want to be seen. They want to be heard, and they want to get involved. And that's a key part which Formula One is moving towards, but hasn't quite unlocked. But as a team, that's something we are ultimately looking to unlock, is to understand how actually dropping a show car in a dealership as a simple activation can get people closer to the sport they love, but also take a photo, put it on their social, you know, speak to team members in situ at the event, learn more about the sport. That's them almost co-creating the story with us. And that's a key part of our kind of fan value proposition, is all around co-creating and bringing people into the fold in what we recognize has historically been a kind of red-roped sport, which needs to invite more people in and be inclusive.
You guys are really doing a good job with that.
Good.
And coming from me doesn't carry much weight, but I'll tell you, you know, as a entrepreneur myself, you know, my day job, I run a tech company. This podcast is my passion project. This is my way of connecting to the sport and, you know, kind of digging in. But I think that the entrepreneur, you see it in Christian Horner. You know, he's a race car driver turned team owner because he couldn't find a team. So he started a team. You know, Toto Wolff, same story. Investor, hey, I can do this. You know, it's a business. I'll run it. Lawrence, perfect thing. I'm a dad. You know, my son races karts. I totally understand, you know, his passion for that. My son wants to be an engineer, you know, for a team. That's his goal, you know. And I was speaking with an engine designer for a Mercedes, you know, and he said, in America, here's what you do, and here's where we recruit as a team from, you know. So getting involved, helping the sport in any way possible. He did it differently. I'm doing it differently. It creates the next generation. The approach that your team and your you know, your boss Rob have taken is what any entrepreneur does, is say, I don't care what industry they're from, if they know what they're doing, it all fits. Business, team, Formula One, it's all the same. It's just different. And you guys, again, this is not flattery. I've pretty much written quite a bit on Aston Martin, and you guys have executed very, very well. And I as a fan, I appreciate the engagement and the activations that you guys do.
Right.
On another note, you guys have probably the cleanest, most polished TikTok I've seen to date. Whoever's in, I just started doing it for this podcast. I have no idea what I'm doing. My kids send me messages like twice a day being like, Dad, don't do this, try that, you know, this isn't working. So I'm getting my TikTok advice from my teenagers, but you guys do a really good job of it.
That's where you're going to find it. That you know, well, you know, they've got plenty of a wide demographic on TikTok, but people actually creating content. I actually don't know the stat, but I don't know if it's something like 3% of all users are the only people who actually create the content. Everyone is just watching.
Right.
And those users are a younger demographic, but actually the watchers are a little bit older. So it's such an interesting business. You know, TikTok is one of our partners, and I have to say we did an introductory meeting, I don't know, very early last year, and we sat actually in Lawrence's kind of boardroom downstairs, which is, as you can imagine, very nice and fancy with lovely artwork on the walls and things like that. And it was a very big table, and it was myself and Rob, my boss, and the team from TikTok, and we kind of sat there like, it was like an awkward blind date because it was like Aston Martin and TikTok. I mean, they feel kind of polar opposite, you know, even in terms of like how long the brands have been around and things like that. But after about 5 minutes, we kind of did our pitch, they did their pitch, and it was like we both have the same premise. It's just we operate, you know, in very different markets, and we're selling different things ultimately, but we want to give people, in our case it's F1 fans, and you know, potentially beyond that, I hope, you know, in time, but we want to give them access, and we want to amplify them and amplify their self-expression as fans, because not all fans are the same, and they want to express themselves in different ways, and they should be recognized. Like, fans aren't a collective, they are individuals, and they give a lot to the teams that they support, and why would the teams not recognize them for that, you know, above and beyond selling tickets to events? You know what I mean? I think real fan engagement is about recognizing that no one fan is the same, and trying your best to recognize that, to make sure people are seen and heard and involved. You know, as I was saying earlier, like, that is our mantra. And TikTok, we're like, well, that's our business model, because we essentially have a platform, we give people tools and the platform to be able to express themselves, and we amplify it, and we give them reward. And it was all about, that was the central thing. We decided that's where we meet in the middle, and it makes sense. And then everything that we've done since around that has just emanated from that idea. And it's been an amazing journey with them. They're such a fantastic group of people that we work with here in the UK, and also the US team quite closely too. And you know, the way in which they're growing, the way they've grown and really looked after Formula One fans, I think, on the platform. I mean, I don't know if you're on TikTok now, you must follow F1 Talk, but like, it's such a growing little subculture on the platform, and people are really finding like a safe space there. No social media platform is, you know, obviously totally safe, and you know, you get all sorts and things like that, but I think TikTok is one of the happier places on the internet for sure. As it stands now, and it's really good to see. And our TikTok, yeah, is the genius of one of our content creators, plus, you know, a lot of support from our social media team, who are based not at races but remotely, and then also TikTok themselves. They gave us our onboarding, they supported us in our journey and our first content creation and things that we published and stuff like that. But Jimmy Horn is one of our content creators, worked with the team a long time, and he's fantastic, and he's a bit of a genius behind that content. So really glad to be able to work with him and have him doing it. But even that, like that, even working with him plus our other social media members of the team, what we want to do is really provide content creators, whether they're F1 fans or they work with the team, wherever they're coming from, the opportunity to express themselves creatively, and for that to be really celebrated. And we're lucky enough that we have, you know, Jimmy in our team. He's very talented, and he does that in a really great way. And TikTok, you know, support us in it. So yeah, hopefully even more things to come from our TikTok channel. But yeah, we're pretty proud of it.
It's really good. I'm going to have one of the F1 reps from TikTok on
Oh,
the
nice.
show
Yeah.
next week, I think it is. So
Awesome.
I've been really impressed with the network of people that they have on there. Quora has been a really good place for Formula One. Facebook and some of those platforms are kind of dated for fandom, but TikTok and Quora have got some really, really robust communities of just healthy fans, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and fans that are like, I think what we've noticed, and I don't know if I can like define it in this way, but I keep on kind of referring to it as almost like the new media, where you have like traditional broadcast and, you know, publications as we see them now, but then we have this like wave of fans creating content on TikTok, on Quora, on Reddit, who maybe are not getting the content that they need from traditional media, and they are creating the content. Like I watch, TikTok lives from a few different F1 fans after every race. I'll like switch between a few. They're doing the race report, and they're sharing it with people, and they might have 1,000 followers or 10,000 or 50,000, but even if their communities are smaller than the viewership across mainstream media or whatever, like they do have influence. So I think it's really important to support these fans as teams, to provide them more access and information to celebrate what they're doing, because ultimately all of this conversation, and even as you're saying earlier about you going to see the show car, you having these conversations, setting up this podcast, like this is all creating the sport. The sport, Formula One is racing, it's entertainment, and it's not just created by cars going around the track at all. It's everything around it. Like it's all the fan experiences, everything they're bringing to the table, all that conversation that is creating like part of the entertainment of the sport. So yeah, as I say, I think fans and people who are generating that conversation and expressing themselves in that way should be seen, and should be celebrated for that.
How did you get into this? Like what's your origin story?
Mine is definitely less traditional, I think. So a couple of people.
Just to level set the conversation, not one person that I've had on the show has had a typical origin story. So
Okay, good. Okay.
you're
Because
not alone.
a lot of students and things like that ask me, and I almost feel bad saying my story because I didn't, it kind of showed up, I didn't actually seek to work in F1 because ultimately I actually, well, maybe this is good advice. I always thought that F1 is like an impossible industry to get into. And I was a fan almost just by, I don't know if there's a term for this, but it was always on in my house growing up. So it was just there. So just a fan by like adjacency to it, all the time. My dad is always a big Ferrari fan. So I just have memories of that. And it was a way to connect with my dad growing up. And that's my only real kind of link to the sport. As a fan at a fan level. And it was during kind of, I don't know at what stage of COVID, the middle, something like that. And I was consulting at the time, and I'd made a decision not to continue a contract I was doing because it like didn't really feel right. It was one of those things, but there was so many redundancies and stuff happening, and it felt really scary. But I just thought like, no, this is what I should do. And then I got a LinkedIn message essentially from I guess a headhunter or a recruiter. And I followed up and I went through the process, and I just kept saying yes. And at some points I had no idea exactly if it was for Formula One or what it was for. Like at the beginning it was just a luxury car business, and then it evolved, and because it was all very top secret and things. Yeah, and because as well my current boss was on gardening leave, like I didn't even speak to him, like I didn't even know who he was. So I was also,
What is gardening leave?
because he was coming from another team,
Okay,
you have
okay,
like a
okay.
period of like time where you don't work on anything. I don't really know how it works, but I'd never even met him or spoken to him and didn't even know who he was. So I was interviewed by like his boss's boss, and yeah, it was all, I don't know, there was a lot of stages, and there was a few weeks that went by and I didn't really know what was going on. But yeah, ultimately I was offered the role, and was kind of temporary to begin with, or a contractor because I was a consultant at the time. And it felt right, immediately as soon as I joined. The culture and the teams, like amazing. It just felt like a family. I was so daunted as well, given that I'd never worked in Formula One and I didn't know the terms that everyone knew. But all of a sudden, I think the fact that everyone was so kind and so helpful in the team, and also we were all remote, so we're all kind of still like getting used to that, and especially with people traveling and stuff, and everyone was kind of banded together. And it felt right. Yeah, so I've been here now 2 years, but yeah, it was, I feel like I got very lucky to pick up that email and just keep saying yes to every stage, and do what I can to impress everyone that I met on the journey. But yeah, it's been a fantastic opportunity. I feel very grateful for it. And I guess the only advice I would give, because I do get this question a lot, about how to get into Formula One, you know, whether you're in marketing or another area. And I do think certainly in marketing and PR, don't underestimate, you know, what you know as a fan, you know, and what you can, so, you know, forget your CV for a moment. Maybe you've never worked in motorsport before. Maybe like me, you'd worked in fashion houses. I did actually work at a time for Tommy Hilfiger, and we had a partnership with F1 with Mercedes. So I did have that experience. But it's very different launching a Lewis Hamilton capsule collection to managing an F1 team brand. But yeah, don't underestimate what you kind of know inherently, because you appreciate the sport and you see it from that angle. I genuinely feel like I did a lot of preparation for my interviews, but I ultimately went in there and talked about my experience as a fan and my perception of the sport and my perception of the brand, and how I feel it could pivot to meet what fans need and meet them where they are. And it was those kind of conversations based on like intuition and experience as a fan that I think kind of got me through. So yeah, it's certainly not as, you know, a lead or like red rope maybe as people think. And I don't think people realize either that F1 teams are really big. I think we have about 700 people. I'm not entirely sure now because we've been growing really fast, but certainly Mercedes, McLaren might have, you know, 1,000+ people, which feels pretty crazy, I think, for race teams. You know, what people might totally think there's 2 cars, 2 drivers. But yeah, Formula One teams are just incredible in the way that they have the most advanced technology possible, because they're literally measuring things in like tenths of seconds in terms of continuous improvement and progress and innovation. And that's stuff that can be applied to so many other industries. So you've got so many people working on all these what feel like minute parts of the whole operation. I mean, I think you kicked off the podcast around, you know, F1 being a business. Like it really is a really sophisticated business, and such a fantastic example of a teamship, and how when that works, it works really well.
It's funny that you say that, because, you know, we connected over what, a LinkedIn message or, you know, whatnot. And it's amazing how accessible that people are. And, you know, I had the head of esports for Williams on the show,
Awesome.
asked the same question. You know, he said they basically inquired on what they would appreciate from the team for fans. And he sent a message and said, careers. I'd love to hear about careers. And that person private messaged him back and said specifically what started a conversation. Fast forward, he helped kind of advise around esports, then became the head of their esports team. I had the head of Mercedes Wind Tunnel, you know, she wrote letters, you know, back when you wrote letters to Benetton, you know, and wrote hundreds of letters until somebody responded. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Is like, if you have an appreciation for the sport and the pace and the pressure, and a respect for that, you know, it's a matter of sending Kate one private message on LinkedIn or 100, and maybe you respond, maybe you don't, but you know, there's
Oh, totally. I mean, it is accessible in that sense. And also they operate like any other business, you know, with vacancies that go on, we have graduate programs, or like in so many different areas. And, you know, we advertise roles like any other business. But yeah, maybe it is I'm not sure. For me, I mean, definitely, I don't think I ever had thought to apply to a job in Formula One, because I just assumed that's just something that people who work in Formula One work in Formula One. You know, I don't know how to put it anywhere simply, but it just really fell out of reach. I wouldn't have even considered that it was an option. But now that I'm in it, I realize actually that perception is completely false, and that, you know, it is a case of sometimes right place, right time, but also people being able to understand and appreciate, as you say, like their appreciation for the sport, what they know, what they can bring to the table, and kind of knowing their worth and getting that in front of the right person. And luckily today where we're at is that you can quite easily connect through LinkedIn, to social and stuff like that. A lot of fans and a lot of people reach out to a number of us directly, and where we can, we always try to respond as much as possible, because that's still fan engagement as well, and it's important. So yeah, but yeah, not, I guess not a conventional story, and probably not as exciting as some others. But yeah, it definitely was an exciting experience for me. I'm glad it happened.
But it shouldn't be. I think it should be real, and I think that's what you're saying is it's real because when yeah, my wife always asks, she's like, "Why are you doing that?" You know, and I just tell her like, "This is my long form application to end up in Formula One day. Don't know
Yeah,
how, don't know
yeah,
what. I love pressure. The entrepreneur in me, I love pressure. I love chaos.
mm,
I don't care for drama, but I can see through it, and it just every approach changes over time. Am I going to do it today? No, I have young children. I can't travel the world, and so um I do think it's really helpful for young people to hear that. It's really one of the two key factors of this show in particular is as an encouragement for young people to see that this big intimidating beast that Formula One is not really that scary. It's a business. It's like
yeah,
TikTok. It's like any other company, that needs talent and needs people to develop. Because I can tell you, running a tech company, finding people that are obsessed with continuous improvement, like you said earlier, is rare. And anytime that you have, a communication to fans or a pool of candidates that know that we seek continuous improvement, digital
mm,
transformation, we're using we have to improve at tenths of a second every day,
yeah.
everywhere. There is no coasting through this career. So
There's really
that's
no, I mean, no disrespect to other places I've worked at all, because I think every experience is valuable and shapes us and guides us where we need to go. But yeah, I'm not sure I've ever worked anywhere or in any other industry that has kind of taught me the work ethic that I've learned here. Because it sounds cliche, but yeah, we work really fast. But the model of innovation and the bravery to keep going is really important for a Formula One team, because you're constantly in this cycle of like constant iteration, and every day or every season there's maybe new parameters. This year it was the cost cap. In time as well. I think next year there's a change in tires, and there's lots of different technical things that probably I'm not the best person to talk to about, but they're coming in, and all of that presents challenges, new obstacles where you have to problem solve. And it's the same in the area of marketing, where the media landscape is changing every day, and there's new trends and there's new things, and we're all scared to see, what we want to be early adopters, but what do we really focus on? And you know so I really haven't worked anywhere. I think that's really challenged me in a way that Formula One has, but in such a good way, because when you're put in like uncomfortable spaces, you grow. And I can certainly see that myself, and also the members in our team as well, and my team members.
that's a great story. So you come from a family of motorsports fans.
No, a motorsport fan. Actually, no,
Eh,
two, I would say. So my dad was a big Ferrari fan.
Okay.
He used to buy BMWs if he bought a car. And I remember we had like a small Jeep. I can't remember what brand it might have been, but and they were like, he's really into cars. And they were always red. So his thing was like, I can't afford a Ferrari, but this is great, and I have it in red. Just so I supplement that. Yeah, he used to wear the merch and everything. He was big into it, and it would always be on the TV. Um, I remember always thinking like, this is just the longest show in the world, because it would be like 2 hours of the same, what looked like the same thing.
Yeah.
But now my appreciation is very different. Actually, I never think the races last long enough. I always want them to last a bit longer, especially if they're pretty exciting. But yeah, and then my sister is a big F1 fan as well. When I was doing interviews and stuff, she was giving me as much of her knowledge as she could share. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of been in the house. That's the best way I can put it, really. But I'd never actually I've been to like Brands Hatch, but I'd never been to like a Grand Prix till I actually got this job. I mean, I'd never seen a Formula One car up close until I got this job. So even now, like 2 years in, if I go to the garage and stuff, I'm still absolutely blown away. Like, it is the most amazing thing, no matter what angle you're coming from, new to the sport. don't care about the sport, obsessed with it, whatever it is. Like, see a Formula One car, there's so many things to appreciate. Like,
Yeah.
firstly, it's really beautiful. Like, we have a very beautiful car as well. We have a lovely livery, but it's really beautiful. It looks extremely tactical and complicated, which is just something anyone can appreciate, because they can't get their head around how it could be made. And also across a race weekend, sometimes if anything happens, the team have to like rebuild part of it. Like, you can't really get your head around it. And it looks like it should be heavy, but it's not. It's like 800 kilograms or something, but it's like 1,000 horsepower. So it's just an insane machine, I think, that anyone can appreciate. And even now, I'm pretty blown away by it. I haven't actually got a chance to bring my dad to a Grand Prix, but hopefully we'll go full circle, and I will at some point. But yeah, it was always in my house. And I think now that I work in the sport, I've now brought my family back into it, so they now watch it. My friends watch it, but I think my friends mainly watch it because of Drive to Survive, rather than having any interest in what I do. But yeah, I mean, I've noticed since I worked here, and even before I got the job, just such an explosion of attention on Formula One. It's part of the reason I wanted to join, because I was like, it feels like such a pivotal time to take advantage of this new popularity and kind of shift the needle on maybe where the teams are operating in the sport, certainly in terms of marketing and how they engage people. So yeah.
You give me hope. My daughter sits next to me all the time. Dad, do you want to watch a race or whatever? And she doesn't care. Like, she could name a driver, she could name a team, but I just, when I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking 10, 15 years down the road, I'm going to hear her say, oh my gosh, my dad was watching this all the time. He took me to races, and and now I'm a fan. So,
well, sometimes that is, I've talked to so many like women. I don't know, just say it's generally women, it's not, but I have talked to a lot of women who say, oh, my dad used to watch it, that's how I got into it. We work a lot with if you follow her on TikTok, I don't know, F1 Tony is her handle. Tony Karen Brown is her name, and she's fantastic, and she does a lot of F1 insights on her TikTok channel. And she says it was her dad that brought her into the sport, and we've had lots of conversations about it. And it is such a common narrative that I hear, and it's really sweet. And there's different things. I mean, some people I've talked to, that's what they bonded with their father over, was on F1 or on sport in general. And but it just shows you how sport does have the power to kind of connect people, like unite people rather than divide. Even if you've got someone in your family or a friend or an enemy or whatever who's polar opposite to you, you support the same team or have an appreciation for a sport, like you can find a common ground. So yeah, I guess it's a pretty common narrative, but it's quite sweet. And I hope in time you'll hear a little bit of a change in terms of, my dad used to watch it too. We used to watch it in the house, or my mom's a big fan, or whatever, a little bit of a change in the kind of roles that people's sex plays in that whole narrative. But yeah, it's a good thing, in a way. Like, everyone has a different journey and how they get to become a fan.
My wife tweaked her back when Leclerc won in Monza, so she jumped off the couch to scream when he crossed the finish line, and couldn't move her neck for like 2 days. And so we are all fan. My son races karts, so
yeah, that's awesome.
We're at a track quite a bit, so I do hope this rubs off on them and they get into it. I know my son will, but my daughter is, she's a daddy's girl, so I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think it's like, it can be like in Austin, I saw this in particular, it can be such a family sport as well. There's so many families in Austin, and at Silverstone as well, it's a super big kind of family orientated race, which is so good to see. Because as well, it's like a 3-day thing, it's a bit of a commitment. Most people do, I say most people, I would say generally people watch from home as well. And if it's not like an isolated experience, you do it at home with family or friends. So yeah, it's unique in that sense. Whereas, with football, you'd see a lot more people going to the pub or the bar to watch it. The way people experience F1, consume it, watch it is definitely different to other sports in that way.
I agree. You know, I wrestled with that for a long time. So Coda this year was my first actual race that I've attended.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been to IndyCar races. I've been to the track quite a bit with my son, but this is how I experience a race. So I have all the data, I have the track stuff, I have the live feed, and just in my mind, it was always, this is my experience, every weekend. And if I go to a race and I'm stuck at a corner here, this is all I get to see, and thankfully my wife was like, just go, like, just do it. And so we went to Coda. It was a date weekend. It was awesome. It was fun. Incomparable to go and be 20 feet away from a car going 200 miles an hour, where you can actually hear the wind
Mm,
downforce coming off the car, and the engine. I mean, it is just mind blowing. And to see a car turn at 180 miles an hour, like, I would have trouble taking my car 20 miles an hour on, is just mind blowing. The environment, everything is incredible. You know, I probably won't ever not attend a race here stateside going
yeah,
forward, because it was such a great
different
experience.
experience. It's so different though, like to, you nearly being at a race sometimes, and I've been kind of in different areas watching the race at a Grand Prix, and like you kind of almost don't know exactly what's going on entirely, which is part of like the allure of it, because you're not watching it, as you say, you don't have your multi screens in front of you where you can totally get a full view of the race. You're getting kind of bits of it and what's happening over there, and in a way it's an entirely different experience. It's really interesting, but some people like both. Some people like only one. Some people don't like going to Grand Prix because they want to have that kind of setup. But I think it is one of the only sports in that sense that you can experience in such a unique way, depending on the channel or where you're watching it, or how you're watching it, who you're watching it with. But yeah, I mean, going to a Grand Prix it's just the noise and everything that's really special, and the fans as well. Especially at Coda, I was absolutely blown away by the fans. I think because the weather as well was very hot and dry, but
Yeah.
the weather was good, and everyone was just so happy, high spirits, and I don't know, there's just such a really friendly atmosphere there.
Yeah.
And when you get large, I mean, I don't know, there's 500,000 people or something there, and you get large groups, and especially around sport, like you can get some clashes and things like that. And a few things, that happened this year certainly weren't good and negative at Grand Prix, but I definitely found at Coda it was a very friendly, like welcoming, fun atmosphere. It was pretty amazing.
It was. So when you kind of on that note, how much does your role play in like hospitality and partners? I mean, that whole experience that you have with your partners at the track,
Yep.
how involved are you over that experience that they receive?
It's so we have a guest experience team essentially who manage all the hospitality, be it in the paddock or paddock club, secondary hospitality, offsite events, all of that. I guess my role is at that level of designing what does the experience really look like from a brand level. So when a guest enters into paddock club, for instance, how are they greeted? What are they given? What are they looking at when they first walk in? Where are the branding opportunities as well for partners, for instance? So it's that kind of a brand visibility level within those hospitality spaces, but also at an experience level as well. And then the guest experience team will execute against that and also bring their expertise in terms of event management, hospitality management, to the table too. So really for me, it's ahead of the season, designing for a paddock club experience or a paddock experience exactly what we want, messages we want to land, and how what we look like essentially. So all the branding services, all of that ultimately at some point gets thrown my way. So yeah, in a nutshell, I wouldn't have much to do with the whole hospitality experience throughout the season. It's ahead of time when we develop brand guidelines and we create brand strategy for the year and a team narrative and all of that stuff that gets fed into then all of our real estate across the season, including paddock and paddock club experiences and hospitality. So my work is for next year is kind of being done now, for all the trackside stuff. And then I luckily, get to watch it play out and experience it if I do go to a race in season as well, and to check things out and see how things are going and look at opportunities for the following year. But yeah, not actively involved almost in season in hospitality. It's kind of done much more ahead of time.
Are you over the livery, the suits?
Yes,
Are
there's a
you?
lot of people there's a lot of people that are though. So because we are a part of Aston Martin, and ultimately that is our like mothership brand,
Hmm.
um, really designed for the livery and for the suits and for, yeah, I guess some of those different touch points that are very critical for our exposure come from Aston Martin as a group. And then it goes through various layers of approval and input from our side, from myself, from our partnerships team as well. Obviously, they're all spaces and services where we have sponsorship and partnership branding. So there's a lot of lines of approval. But I have not seen the livery for next year, but I have seen the suits
Okay.
in my inbox earlier. So yeah, they do ultimately get put through our team.
So we should be excited based upon your smirk.
I think so. I'm really excited about next year in general for this team, because I don't know how much you know about kind of what's coming, but I'm sure you do know this, but we've got Fernando Alonso joining our lineup with Lance. So excited about that. I think he's gonna demand a winning culture, and he's going to be a bit of a game changer for the team. I think
Yes.
Sebastian's been unbelievable. I think as a experienced driver and all round wonderful person,
Yeah.
a great person, and he'll be missed for sure. But he's come at that stage of the team, early stages, especially with Lance in the seat beside him, where he could support Lance a bit and he could support the engineers as well. And he knows a lot about the car and really feed that back. And I think he's done a lot in terms of progress,
Mm.
performance progress for us and where we're going. And he believed in the vision, which is really important. But now we move on to, I think, we're at year 3 now, in a really serious stage of the project. And we kind of call it that because there's so many moving parts of it and there's a lot of investment in it. So we do kind of call it the project because it is part of a longer term vision, of being hopefully in contention for winning championships in maybe 3 to 4 years time from now.
You're
Um,
5. That's
5
what he promised.
is the line, yeah. So that is what we're shooting towards, and Fernando coming on board in year 3 is a big part of that journey, of that climb. And we have a new factory being completed. I think May is stage 1 of it next year. And it'll be the newest factory in F1 for a very long time, the most sustainable factory in F1 for a long time. And I think really represents the investment in the team and the commitment we have into the vision to be a winning team and be in contention, be a competitive team.
Yeah.
Lawrence is very open that, like, we don't have to win. We want to win, but we don't have to win, but we have to be competitive and in contention to win championships, because that's the fight. And I think everyone knows who follows F1, like, those gaps between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're small. Even the gap between and last place is small. We're talking seconds. So yeah, it's a tough journey. It's a long one, but it's something that we're all really excited about. And year 3, I think, will be a big change for us. New factory, new driver, and lots of new things coming as well, which I can't say, but great things coming for the team.
Yeah, please don't say. Don't Please don't get me blacklisted from the rest of your team.
That's all right.
Um what's been your pinch me moment? 2 years in F1. At what point were you like, what am I doing here?
Oh, God, I know I have a few. I mean, it's recent, but when we were in Austin the other week, I have definitely have a couple, but in Austin we have a community which we call, so I'm just going to grab my charger. We have a community which we call I Am, and so we have active I Am members of that community. You kind of sign up to our newsletter and our benefit scheme and things like that for fans. And we hosted a I Am event in Austin, downtown in the Soho House, and we had about 40 to 45 fans. I think we had the opportunity to take on, and I don't know if I've ever experienced anything like it in terms of the excitement, the emotion. It was the most incredible fan event I think I've been to, and it was a relatively small one in comparison to some of the other events we've held. And but the emotion in the room was like unbelievable. Like the feeling was just palpable. So they arrived. It was like a 2-hour event, and we had F1 Tony, who we work with from on TikTok, obviously. Was kind of like the master of ceremonies, and she did a talk to begin with and got everyone really hyped up. And at that point, everyone was just super excited. And then they had an audience with Sebastian Vettel for like nearly an hour, and he was so candid about his answers to the questions that Tony posed to him. You know, he was very nostalgic about these last few months of his racing career, and it was honestly the most amazing thing. There was a gentleman in the front row just absolutely bawling, crying, and it's not all about that, but it was the whole idea that we'd like brought people together. And the US for us it's a known territory for sure. I mean, it's an important market for Aston Martin and for a lot of our partners. But in terms of Formula One, like it's exploded there massively, but maybe the understanding yet isn't totally there in terms of like, you know, people in the US are fans of F1, new fans anyway that have come in are fans of F1, maybe through Netflix or other means, I'm not sure, TikTok, whatever it might be. And I'm strictly talking about these new fans that have come in, so I don't get like attacked
You
by
forgot Formula Access. Where was that
yeah.
on your list? Come on.
True. But yeah, I know there's a thing between, you know, the fans that have always been around, these new fans and things like that. So I'm not dismissing that, but certainly this kind of newer wave of fans who are a little bit younger, a little bit more balanced as well in terms of sex and stuff like that, and age, and like, you know, they we're not sure exactly in a way, like, are they just fans of F1, or, you know, are these fans that could be attracted to us as a team? You know, I feel like you're in the States, you're less inclined maybe to just think of like one team or one driver you support, whereas in Europe, people are a little bit more like they have a favorite team and maybe a second, things like that. So to get those people together and see the passion they had, the way they felt about Aston Martin and what we were doing, and like what they had to say about Sebastian, and especially the younger people that were there that are really sold into Lance and everything, like it was just really rewarding. It was unbelievable. It was amazing to be part of it. So there was that. And I think the first time ever I met both the drivers together was pretty amazing, because we did a photo shoot with them, and I hadn't yet met an F1 driver. Now I've met a couple of them across the grid. But yeah, that was pretty insane. I just kind of stood there like, because these people as well seem on screen, they just seem so larger than life.
Right.
And one, even just physically, they're not, they're quite narrow and small, like they have to fit into a F1 car. And so yeah, not in any way that's like underwhelming. It's not, it's just, it's surprising. Um they're very normal people that way. I know they're not, because they're Formula One drivers, and you know, I've never driven a Formula One car, probably couldn't even turn it on. But yeah, they just all of a sudden felt relatable, seeing them in just a working environment doing their job, whatever their job was for that day, which was getting photos taken and kind of sitting down with us and talking about the marketing content, you know, jobs they had on their list for that day. And just to get to know them at a level of just regular people has been pretty kind of pinch me moment just in itself. Yeah, it's not often, I think, in your life you can kind of get close to people who you've always just seen on screen, and you admire so much because they do something so incredible and crazy. And when I was growing up, certainly F1 seemed dangerous. It's not, you know, like that.
Yeah.
There's always a level of danger for sure, but it's a lot safer today. But when I was growing up, like, you grew up with a lot of those scary stories and things like that. So these people you really put on a pedestal, and to get to spend time with them, get to know them, and also feel very welcomed by them and get a great response, yeah, has felt really good. And I still kind of pinch myself of the fact that I've got to have those interactions.
You know what I really like about Lance is he carries a pretty hefty weight and target on his shoulders, and you know, just around fandom, and he deals with it so well. You know, his just, call it, say, temperament, or just his steadfastness despite everything on, he never loses it, because it's a really
Yeah.
easy target to shoot at. I mean, and people do it all the time, and
Mm.
he just holds himself really, really well. I mean, Vettel, I talked to Vettel's coach this morning. I had him on the show, and
Oh, cool.
super good guy, but like, he gets all the attention, whereas, Lance kind of has a huge target, but he handles himself so well,
Mm.
and I don't think that that's PR training, media training. I think that's probably having Lawrence as a dad, but I also think that that's probably some real talent under there as well, that he hangs his hat on, and he is clear in his identity and his capabilities, which is necessary. I mean, you see drivers come unglued all the time because of that very same pressure around the paddock, not him, but with other drivers, where
Yeah.
they literally just, that target gets painted and they just can't handle the Mazepin was a perfect example, it
Yeah,
just,
totally. I think people forget Lance is he's a 24-year-old guy,
yeah, yeah,
um, and I'd say that just he's a young person. Like, I mean, and you see it a lot with footballers as well, kind of propelled into fame and success, and all of a sudden, like you say, you've got hefty weight on your shoulders to be the person that people want you to be, and live up to ideals and all these kind of things. And I think anyone would struggle with that. And you're exactly right from my perspective. Um, I certainly think that Lance handles himself very well, and he has a self-confidence, which really comes from within. He's got worth from within. He believes in what he's doing. He cares about the drive. He cares about the project. He also has really good people around him. He has friends within his management team, as well as people that he's obviously hired in, as any driver does, to support their management, their training, and everything else. And they're really good people, and I think he surrounds himself with good people that are going to support him, and that's what you need. So yeah, I'm excited, I think, to see what Lance does in the coming years as well. He is a good driver in the last few races as well. I think he's gained a lot more confidence, and it's difficult when you've got the world looking at you. And I don't want to speak for him because I don't know this, but I imagine it is also difficult. You've got the world looking at you, and you've your dad in the garage. We all experience that kind of pressure from family members, from parents, and it's that times 1,000, I'm sure, with him being on the global stage. But yeah, he's a wonderful guy. He's a really, really sweet person, and the team around him are fantastic as well. And yeah, I commend him certainly for the way he's handled some of the difficult comments and conversation around him and his career. So yeah, it's great working with him as well. I'm really excited to see how him and Alonso get along next year. They do get along quite well. I think that'll be a really fun dynamic.
yeah. If it didn't come unglued in Austin, it's going to be a really great thing to watch. So
So
I think this is the right time for Alonso to do that, and definitely download, 20 years of racing into Lance.
yeah.
So Kate, I want to respect your time. Seriously, thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on here. And I know we always want to be a platform for you and your team. If you guys see unique opportunities around the office of, we want to communicate a message of HR, of engineering, aero, whatever that is. I think it's really encouraging for young people to hear how you get into this, because
Yeah.
there's a major disconnect everywhere around how I become an engineer and how I become a Formula One employee, whatever that level looks like. So I
Sure.
appreciate your time.
No,
You are
thank you.
definitely the perfect person for the role.
Oh, thank you. That's really good. That's good to hear. It was a pleasure talking to you. It was a really good conversation.
Yeah, it really was. Look forward to the rest of the season and next year. And like I said, you're always welcome. I know people are going to be really interested in this. So
Great. Thank you
thanks
so
for
much.
opening the door.
No, not at all. It was great. Thank you.